About 8 years ago or so, a couple thought experiments that were running through my head got me so curious, so perplexed, and so interested that they actually caused me to start meditating every day, 20 minutes per day, silent meditation for a year and beyond the year. But within this first year, I only missed about 7 or 8 days. That's how powerful these thought experiments were. And in this video, I want to share them with you. To me, meditation is consciously being where you are without fighting anything, without putting any effort into anything, a space where no effort, no goal, or no agenda is required. Witnessing of your experience, your sensations, your thoughts, etc. Letting that stuff happen. That sounds kind of lame. Like, why would anybody want that? So of course there's those classic benefits like, oh yeah, you want to have an efficient brain. And I saw in a study somewhere that someone who meditates has way more white matter than gray matter in their brain. And that's efficient for your brain and you can think better. And okay, so I better buckle my seatbelt and sit still for 20 minutes every day so that I can get all of that brain mass. And so that's a fair reason to do it. That's a fair reason. But there's a more existential reason that's a little bit more head scratchy than that. I want you to think of your mind like the engine of a car. Your body is the car and your mind is the engine. Unless you've been meditating for a long time already, when someone says to you, hey, go sit down for 30 minutes and meditate in silence, close your eyes and just meditate. For most people, that sounds terrible. That sounds like, God, 30 minutes sitting there doing nothing? That sounds horrible. To some people, this would straight up sound like their idea of torture. And for some people, it would just be like, oh, I would be bored for 30 minutes straight, and that would be uncomfortable. And to me, that's like if you have your mind as the engine of a car, that's like the car being afraid or uncomfortable with someone looking under the hood at the engine, right? Because when you meditate, you get to open the hood on your mind and see what's in there and see how it works from a subjective perspective, which you would think would be an extremely interesting thing. I know when it comes to cars, I can stare at an engine for a long time. Anyone should be much more interested in their own mind, their own steering mechanism through life. Why can't we sit with that? What's so unpalatable about our own mind that we can't sit there for such a short period of time with it? So this is the thought experiment right here. That's what it was. It's just to recognize this distaste that our minds have with looking at themselves. And in some people, it's like, oh, that would be boring to sit down for 30 minutes. And in some people, it's just abject fear of like, that would be, I don't know if I want to sit down for 30 minutes in silence with my own mind. The question is, what are you afraid of there? Or if it doesn't seem like you're afraid of anything, but that it would be boring, I would challenge that it's just boredom. Because I think if you go under the surface and you think about sitting with your own mind for a long time, that there is a level of discomfort our minds have with themselves. It's like we're not comfortable in our own skin. This discomfort with your own mind, your mind's discomfort with itself, hiding in the background of your conscious, is something you're carrying with you through your entire day and your entire life. And unless you sit down and face it, it will stay there for your whole life. Which if you're okay with, then by all means, continue on, pause the video, and go back to whatever you were doing. But like me, if you're a little suspicious here, then continue to watch. Hopefully by hearing this, you're a little bit suspicious. You're thinking, yeah, you know what? Looking under the hood of my mind, of this thing I take with me everywhere in my life that steers me, that protects me, etc., should be the most interesting possible thing to look at. But yet it's almost this universal feeling of like, that would be uncomfortable, that would be scary, that would be boring. in like this kind of freakishly, like, it would be boring, but it would kind of hurt type of way. And most people would say that that's a normal thing. Yeah, of course. Of course it would be boring to sit with yourself for 30 minutes. That's totally understandable. But I would also scratch my head at that too. Like, is that normal? Is that really, like, the fact that sitting with your own self for some period of time would be extremely uncomfortable? Like, and just relaxing your mind and feeling whatever comes up. Is it really, like, cool that that's super uncomfortable? And maybe there's a little bit of a fear that certain thoughts would come up, or certain painful memories and traumas and uncomfortable thoughts would come up. And that's actually very possible. And maybe there's some thoughts that you might have, like, oh, meditating doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't help me make friends. It doesn't help me get dinner, food on the table. And, maybe you're right. And so there's a perfect reasoning to just completely stuff this thing under the table and never look at it. But I would say that when you're ready, you will be curious about this. So you do start meditating, and you do look into your mind. I can tell you ahead of time what's going to happen if you want to hear. Of course, to actually get this benefit and see what's going to happen, you have to do it yourself. But I will tell you ahead of time that what you will see when you look into your mind like this is you will come across uncomfortable feelings that you have compressed into your body, that have been based around just life throwing itself at you and you holding on to these painful experiences and not knowing that you're holding on to them. You will have to process those. So you'll process those. What you'll also come across is your mind's way of being unfair. What do I mean by this? So say you're parking poorly in your car, right? You parking like this and the lines are like that. But you just kind of whip it in every day, jump out of your car, and one day your neighbor comes out and says, hey, you've been parking like shit lately, and you need to fix that. For most people, when we are faced with the truth like this on something we're doing wrong, we don't want to admit our faults or mistakes. It's just a natural instinct to avoid and say, no, shut up, it's not my fault, da-da-da-da. It's the blocking out mechanism. And I think our mind does this for self-protection. Whatever the reason is, though, the fact is just our mind does have a self-bias that allows us to commit shitty behavior without acknowledging it. But it's the best feeling when you finally say to your neighbor, you know what, you're right. I have been parking like shit, and I'm sorry, and I'm going to fix it starting now. And in that change, a genuine character development happens where you learn to play more fair for everybody's benefit in the parking lot, and especially your neighbor who you were parking, almost into. So what I'm saying is, when you go into your mind, you're going to notice the way that your mind thinks unfairly about other people and about the world. And the reason it's uncomfortable to sit there is because your mind is trying to prevent you from noticing your self-biases. Just like our minds don't like us to be pointed out for the things we're doing wrong, because it's uncomfortable. But if we do this, we get genuine character growth. Genuine character growth comes out of meditation. Before the video ends, I want to give you two more things. The first one is I'm going to give you another thought experiment. And the second one is I'm going to give you a meditation challenge that I will challenge you to follow. Most of the time, we give a lot of attention to the things that are around us all the time. So, for example, our bodies, our friends, our cars, food, the house we're in, etc. All these things that are big parts of our lives that we're constantly interacting with. There's a lot of attention paid to them. There's a lot of optimization. Clothing for the body, the medical field, which is about the body, the car industry and fine-tuning cars to be perfect, just how you like it, these things that you're using every day. It's important to make sure that they're, great, that they're safe, etc. But there's one thing that's generally unpaid attention to that we use every single day, which is our consciousness, which I don't think is very commonly talked about because it also doesn't really pay the bills to talk about it. But I noticed several years ago, before starting my meditation journey, that this one thing that was in all of my experiences, my consciousness itself, the thing that if you took away, I would just be black out. And that everybody also has with them all the time, every single day, and uses to experience their whole life. That consciousness, no one talks about it. It's so untalked about. It's never a topic of conversation, like almost ever. It's just almost completely overlooked. It's like, it bewildered me. Why don't we talk about this? What's going on here? So that was a huge head scratcher for me. I started thinking about this. Why is it that this extremely relatable thing that everybody has every day in every single experience that you're conscious of, the fact that you're conscious of that experience, your awake mind, that is so interesting. That is so wild. But it's never talked about in any sort of depth. And the fact that that was the case, it got me extremely suspicious and curious about consciousness itself, because I knew I had it all the time. Everyone had it all the time with them. And it drew me to meditation. Now, a thought experiment like that doesn't necessarily have to draw someone to meditation. It can just be a random thought experiment. Why did it draw me to meditation? To me, it's because meditation is the one time when I could take my mind off of all the things that demanded my focus that were not consciousness. It's the one time when you can relax and actually pay attention to your mind itself. It's the one time when you can open up the hood on your mind and look inside and experience it for yourself. I could experience it for myself. Okay, so now you've had the two thought experiments. Looking into the car hood, the car that's afraid for you to look at its engine. Our minds are afraid that we look at them. That's number one. Thought experiment number two, which is this thing that everybody uses all the time, every single day, but never talks about. And number three, now it's time for me to give you your challenge. So if these things interest you, and you want a little curriculum to help explore your mind, here's what I would suggest. It's going to be a challenge. It's not going to be easy, but this is what I did when I first had these thought experiments. Sit down and meditate for 20 minutes every single day for 1 year, and don't miss a single day. Make this a priority. Otherwise, it will not happen because we don't naturally have a biological drive to meditate. So you need to prioritize this yourself, and you need to feed it with your curiosity based on the thought experiments that we just did to explore your own mind. And you might not uncover much for a while, but I promise you, if you do this and you do a silent meditation practice for 20 minutes a day for a year, you will learn things about yourself and about your mind that you didn't know were possible to learn, that you won't be able to explain to other people, and that will potentially change your life completely. So there's your challenge. Let me know if this video made you curious, and I will see you next time. Thank you.